I'm Eric Barden.
I'm Amy Barden.
And this is another episode of Bombarded, where we continue to talk to Lisa Daugaard, PDA, Purpose Dignity.
Co-executive director of Purpose Dignity Action. And
I love those kind of names. Lead Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. There we go. Yeah, so we're talking about the effort to get people the resources that they need so that they don't continue to be high utilizers and recidivate crime over and over and over again. Try to get them into services where they can get the help they need to get stabilized oftentimes in lieu of jail. So it'll be fun to continue kind of diving into how do we know when we're successful? What does success looks like for a lead? What are the changes that she's implementing? As you had mentioned previously, she iterates, tries to learn from what's worked and what hasn't. And so I want to understand what those changes are, what we can anticipate, and then what success looks like and what metrics we'll use to be able to determine whether or not we're being successful.
Yeah, she has been one of the main thought partners I've had. I mean, we talk all the time, and this year we've been working urgently on this question. So again, who do you send first to the 911 call? And then who do you hand off to? And how do you design a system that transparently reports whether or not somebody's doing better? And I think she named some of the challenge with that is that we do know recovery kind of looks like this, right? That people regress. And so what is the threshold? If somebody repeat offends or, they relapse into addiction or something like that, like what is the threshold of tolerance for that? And that stuff is really complicated. So it's been fun to work on with her.
Yeah, one of the things that has been, as long as LEADS existed, sort of that trying to figure out the balance between the wraparound services for folks as they go through the fluctuations of recovery, and the level and need for accountability in that process, so that it can be a little motivator, so that folks know, I better be good at this diversion, because if I don't, I might be going to jail. And historically, there's diversion people and there's accountability people. And what I would love to see us, and you and I have talked about this a lot, what I would love to see is the accountability and the resources working hand in hand and in a complementary way to one another. So we'll ask her about that and see if we can get something done.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's do it.
The concepts that increasingly our partners and allies are talking about is low barrier engagement. So there's no reason for anybody to say no.
Right.
There's nothing, they're not being forced to do anything in particular.
Yeah.
But then you apply the science of behavior change. There's the intentional engagement strategy using the techniques that we know help people change. And that's the objective. So to Eric's question, what is success? I mean, the official answer for LEAD is reduction in crime by that person. That person is less involved in criminal behavior than they were. So we're signing on to the deep objective, which is, actual public safety. But what would our community look like?
Yeah.
We would not have people living in an informal housing sector. Like in other countries, this is, these are shanty towns or favelas that have, because this is just where people live, right? They have utilities and you can get your mail delivered there, because that's just how people, if we're not going to end up there, we have to work backward from what will it take to not have people living in public. And in order for that to be the case, we have to have a recovery services support system that allows people to live indoors in a way that is safe and not just putting them behind a door, which I know many of your guests have correctly said, that is not an answer.
Yeah.
It can facilitate a recovery journey, and it's really hard start somebody on a recovery journey out in, living in public. But it is the housing and shelter is facilitative of that journey. It does alleviate alleviate the pressure on neighborhoods because people are not living in public. But often people who are housed are out in public in a tent, in a structure, because they're with their friends or they're engaged in the illicit economy. So it's much more than just
but it's
housing.
Also not just being inside, because we know that if we have, low barrier housing where everybody's using drugs, it's aesthetically more pleasing for the neighborhood and the community and perhaps the businesses that folks are using inside, but that doesn't, and it might be true that when somebody is indoors, they might have more hope for a recovery that doesn't include living on the streets and using drugs all the time. But I think it's important also to remember that, like, sometimes now we have folks that go to rehab, they get some rehabilitation, then we put them back into housing, put them down into low barrier housing, and now they're surrounded by people using drugs. What do we think is going to happen?
Yeah.
And the same is also true when people are in recovery housing and they relapse, then they also lose their housing.
They lose their housing.
Honestly, that's a mirror image problem. We have to have,
you got to think about this a little bit.
What they call mobility transfers in the permanent housing world, permanent supportive housing world, where if you are in a permanent supportive housing unit, but your needs change, like your medical needs change or your mobility needs change, we need to be able to not have you in a place that, like, you're on a 6th floor walk up and now in a building without an elevator and you can't get there. So you have to be able to move. So we need an arrangement where people don't lose their housing benefit, but the match of the housing resource fits where they are right now. And that's got to move both directions. Most people who enter recovery and, stop using illicit drugs relapse. And you can't, it's kind of like you shouldn't lose your insurance if you lose your job. Similarly, you shouldn't lose your housing just because a very typical sort of regression in your care for a health state occurs. So keeping the person housed, quick and easy mobility transfers, partnership between recovery housing and lower barrier facilities. There's no reason it can't be like that. It just wasn't our current system wasn't designed like that. And now the Trump administration's attempt to correct for that, I would predict, is going to overcorrect so that now we have a lot of recovery housing for people who are not currently using, but most of that population is going to still be using, and we will not have a plan for those people.
We will always need the array, always.
Yeah,
I mean,
just
it's
need
the human
a continuum of care. And we need
to use an
both
off-used phrase.
And you can't, like a ping pong ball, like be, moving from the extreme end of that continuum only to this side or only this side without distorting and having terrible outcomes.
It's so chaotic. I mean, thematically, I speak to that more than anything else. And it's entertaining to me that we as humans, like, I know it's hard for me to change anything. It is. Change is scary, takes a long time. Most of us know what it feels like to relapse in some way, meaning stumble back. It's like, I thought I broke this cycle. I thought I changed, and now here I am again. And for whatever reason, we don't apply that to folks who are in this crisis population.
Completely.
I get asked so often, like, why don't they just change? I'm like, why don't you change? It's hard.
Right? All of our self-defeating behaviors serve us in some way.
In some way.
And you have to meet that need in some other way. So drug use is serving people in a way. It's obviously also often incredibly harmful. But you can't just take that out of the equation and be like, so you're fine, right? Because that was holding up something.
That was the coping mechanism.
And something else is going to have to, and often it is just a sense of support and reassurance. The SAMHSA recovery definition, right, has 4 pillars. And one is a safe place to live.
That's right.
Because of the physical security and just sort of human dignity involved, but not being vulnerable to the chaos and violence that besets you if you're living in public. So safe place to live, access to health resources, which very few Americans have as we
Adequate.
should have.
Yeah.
And, so good access to health resources. But the other two are so ephemeral that people leave them out, but they're often the most important. And one is connection.
Yep.
So a sense of enduring relationship, which is why a lot of our program design makes no sense. It's like, here's a 3-month program or a 1-month program. Like, okay, we need a golden thread of someone who's going to stick with you for months and years and will always be there for you.
Yep.
And then the fourth is meaning and hope. And so that is like,
that's the purpose.
Why are we here? What am I doing this for? And for most of us, if we're going to do a really hard thing that we do not want to do, and it's painful or scary, how we do that is that we think on the other end of that, there's going to be something worth having.
Yep.
And for a lot of our clients, they're not wrong that it's not super clear what that is. And so that's why we have, like in that meeting yesterday, talking about legal services representation that could help somebody get a green card and the ability to work legally. Well, now you have a workable path, right? Help somebody restore their ability to see their children. That's meaningful. So we have to be working on the source of people feeling like, this is my ceiling. They're not wrong. Without some additional help.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's those two factors that I talk about ad nauseum, because I know nobody's talking about it. We're not naming that. And it's really easy to see that.
You do a great job of
Do you think so? I'm trying. Eric calls it Amy Church when I talk, because I'm trying to focus on that piece. We got to talk to Elise Bracken recently, who's running Bridges, right? That's the sober community for kids that partnered with the Recovery High School. But everybody that I know in recovery, and I mean across the spectrum of when I ask about like, when did you believe, basically? Because I think for some people, if this has been your entire life, it takes a lot of imagination to believe that you could be a different type of person, have different type of meaning, use different coping strategies. And everyone always says connection. It always says, it was, I had people around me who held me accountable. I think really good case managers help people become an authority on their own patterns and behaviors. Like, why did you relapse? What is really going on here? And I think that for the most privileged among us, that's really hard, right? To be sort of meta that way and understand what are my vulnerable areas. And then I love how Barsana talks about connection to purpose. I've heard a lot of people talk about that. And we crack up because a lot of our friends who have been mixed up in these systems are now like ultra marathoners, right? It's like the best athletes I know. The best.
Yeah, they got to be addicted to something.
Yeah, gotta be.
They hike peaks all.
Seriously,
guys,
joke is hiking everything.
Come on, guys. What is sports? I mean, this is what. Both watching and participating is.
That's right. You're a football gal.
Yeah,
we could have a whole separate podcast, and you guys just talk.
If I were young today, I would be a flag football player. I think just an example, we were working, and when I say we, I really mean Nicole and her team and the co-lead lodging staff are working to bring folks in from Little Saigon, which is just, super impacted neighborhood with hundreds of people living their lives just on the streets in ways that are not, if we succeed, it won't look like that. Those folks will be living elsewhere and their lives will contain different activities. So we were bringing some, offering co-lead. Again, everybody on our list of high impact people said yes. But this one guy was not sure that he wanted to say yes. And so Nicole, rather than like, do you want to come in? No, like, okay, bye. She's like, what's making you feel like you wouldn't want to come inside? And he said, I'm afraid I'm going to be lonely. And
that's about the most human thing I ever heard.
Yeah. And he was like, my birthday is in 3 days. And I'm afraid that I'll be like in a room and nobody will know or come or whatever. So Nicole's like, oh, we got that. And so, what do you like for your birthday? Ice cream. Okay, we got what kind of ice cream? So that ice cream is in the freezer. Yeah. His birthday came. People knew. Friends that he had on the street had also actually been placed in the same building. So they were allowed, we don't have normally, guests in rooms, just for making sure that we have a serene. It's not permanent housing; it's a temporary place. So we just want to make sure it's safe for everybody. But we made sure that he could visit with his friends. So the point is, if you ask, like, what's the problem?
Yeah.
What are you afraid of? Kind of, there's normally a solution to that, but we do have to ask and find out what that barrier
she's
was.
so good. And that's, again, my desire always to partner with folks who have lived experience. I just find they're the most effective. They can see things that I would never see. Or make assumptions. It's
have
just
intuition.
Yeah,
about what
absolutely.
It could be.
Yeah. And then also, folks on the criminal justice side, I really want peers in jails and prisons. We got to figure that out, because it is the Ginny Burtons and the Jacob Ivan Schmidts and the folks at Weld. I mean, they are the most effective and inspiring voices to that population. We went to Ginny's out program at Olympic, and her mugshot, like that before and after that you've seen, it's on the wall there. And so when we were talking to the guys after, because it's elective, it's not compulsory.
Yep.
And so I was really fascinated talking to people. Why did you want to do this? Because it is hard work. And man, you've got to be brutally honest with yourself in that program. It's like no victims, right? We're not, we are people who are reinventing and being held accountable. But they all said, we heard, it was basically word of mouth. Like we just heard this woman's awesome. And we see like she has credibility.
Yep.
Right. And so I want to pivot and ask you about something else right now, just related to this. We're both in this space that I always say, don't politicize it, don't weaponize it, but absolutely. These issues all get exploited, right, for all different
These
purposes.
have always been the like meat and potatoes of politics, right?
Yeah. It's so frustrating. And that's why I'm just trying to amplify all the voices as fast as I can so that the community understands what's real and what's not. And one of the things I've taken to saying is if somebody says there's a single problem with a single solution, just don't trust them. Just walk, just
100%.
leave. Yeah, leave. Anybody who starts with research says just no. That is too simplistic. So I was really kind of amused and fascinated. You responded to the executive order on homelessness, right? I read your statement on it, and it was very similar to what I responded to. I don't like the term vagrancy. I don't believe that policing should be central in any sort of human service interventions. It's just not right. I think coercion should be when we've exhausted other options. And so some of the language I didn't quite like, I did love. Just reinforcing that this stuff should be evidence-based. We should believe that people can and do change, and we should design our structures that way. So I just admired you because I thought the statement was so good. Everybody kept telling me about, it was the Seattle Nice podcast, right? That you and Erica, people kept saying, Amy, it's so great. You got to listen to it. You got to listen to it. And then later I ran into Erica Barnett and we were chatting about this and she goes, oh man, the
Not
heat
everyone
we
loved
took.
it.
And I was like, really? Because I just felt like you were so pragmatic and non-controversial. I haven't listened to the podcast yet, but tell me about that. Like what was the issue?
Well, I'm seeing it nationally actually, because that podcast got circulated among a number of national advocacy groups as well. I am seeing some, with a lag of a few weeks, some people like, oh, I really appreciated that might be, a pathway. So so people who haven't tracked this carefully know what we're talking about. The executive order says that the federal government will stop funding housing first programs that are low accountability, basically like low effort, and don't foster connection to recovery services and individual progression and growth. To me, that is nothing but, the goal there is nothing but good. It's well framed. There's nothing problematic about the words that are used.
Other than vagrancy, I don't like vagrancy.
The first couple of paragraphs of this order are very, very rhetorical, very they're designed to score political points. And if you skip past that at a policy level, the idea that low barrier housing should have a strong level of support for people who come in with active drug use, makes complete sense. It's also completely consonant with the origins of the housing first model.
That's right.
And what I saw, and there are similar, the order says that there should be appropriate use of civil commitment for people who cannot care for themselves or are a danger to themselves or others, or are gravely at risk because they can't care for themselves. That's just the existing legal standard. It wasn't a change. The order says that people shouldn't be camping in public, which obviously everyone should agree with. And I don't really understand how the left has ceded that. That should be, as a progressive, that should be our objective.
It's so weird. That part's really weird.
It's odd. But and then there was a provision about harm reduction saying that the federal government would no longer fund harm reduction strategies that only foster or that only facilitate illicit drug use, which is no strategy should be only facilitating illicit drug use, right? So,
and that is the terminology, as I recall.
Yeah, that's
right.
That
it doesn't say we're not funding harm reduction,
and they are continuing to fund harm reduction. SAMHSA put out an explainer a couple days later saying they would continue to fund naloxone, they would fund test strips, they would fund a bunch of other sort of prophylactic strategies. They're not going to fund syringe exchange programs, or where they're not going to fund syringes and safer, quote unquote, safer smoking supplies. That is not, as applied, that's not an issue for any community because you can use local funds for those those
you can
services.
Still have nonprofits
and if the federal government will pick up more of the tab for naloxone, then you can just do a sort of funding swap. So this is more impactful, really at the level of sort of symbolism and ideology. I think the order, so I do think the order is problematic, and that's what I said on the podcast, but really because I think that those who wrote it didn't really think through how it's going to play out. And so a number of us in this community who, we absolutely believe that all effort should be toward fostering people's recovery, and sort of, each person should be able to go as far as they are capable of going, and we should actively work to stabilize and enhance people's health. No excuse for not doing that. But people have to start, only a small percentage of people come off the street starting saying I am ready to change my drug use.
Yeah.
They're willing to make other changes first, and then you can start working on drug use. So if we're only going to fund things that assume people are changing their drug use, we're leaving 90% of people out there. And from a public safety, public order standpoint, and an individual recovery standpoint, that's a bad approach.
Yeah.
So a number of us are you just need to, it's fine to say that folks have to be engaged in services, but you can't say that if you allow drug use on your property, that the U.S. attorney is going to put you in federal prison.
Yeah.
And that is what the order says. And I really hope that the dialogue we've started with HUD and with myself and many other people have started with HUD and with the supporters of the executive order will bear fruit. It has not yet. And they currently have a notice of fund availability out that requires, to be eligible, you have to check the box that you have to assert that you will not permit drug use on your premises. That would mean that almost everybody who works with this population would either have to stop working with the population, not work with active users, or completely different organizations get involved who don't want to work with this. So it will, if it continues as it currently is set up, it will have terrible detrimental impacts in the community. But I hold out a lot of hope that dialogue about that will allow the administration to rethink how they're implementing it. And that is what I was calling for. It was not welcome in kind of the advocacy groups, among some of the advocacy groups, that kind of the fight is the thing, right?
Yeah.
You want an enemy and you want to be right, and you want this other side to be wrong.
Yeah.
And this order presented a good opportunity for that fight that what I was saying was not helpful for.
It's just, again, I want people to be intelligent, and to understand. That's, I think, why I admired your statement so much. I was listening to Eric kind of softly debate somebody about this, and he talked about the same thing, that it's not a huge deviance from, policy that's on the books. And he said, well, if it had been the prior administration that issued it, would you see it the same way? And this man, to his credit, he paused and he said, no, I wouldn't. Mm-hmm. And that's what I see a lot of. And I did a roundtable that was a little tricky for me because the framing is just antithetical to the way I think, which is like, we're under attack. How do we keep everyone safe? I think that's bad for mental health. And it's a mental health policy roundtable, so I was trying to be very clear that my perspective is we have failed our neighbors my entire life in these related areas. Nobody has improved homelessness in the last 20 years, no administration. And I mean at the federal level. Certainly, mental health is decompensating, even though we talk more about it, right? We're just not getting these things right. And I think it's a distraction. And I think it slows us down. I don't want my attention to be taken away from these neighbors that I'm trying to help. And so, thank you for listening to that.
Yeah, I think that Eric's, that concept of, if these same words were said by someone you identify as an ally, if you would not have a problem with them, when your opponent says them, you have to have the self-discipline to separate, I don't like or agree with you, but this is not a problem. Right. And I think if you don't have that, we get into this habit of accepting unacceptable conditions just because our friends are presiding over them. And I do not understand why progressives and the left did not beat the right into the streets on this issue. Why were we accepting the conditions that folks were living in and only fighting for their ability to stay there and not be moved around like that?
That's intellectual integrity. I like that.
Progressive agenda.
So this,
I love that.
This 2025 refurbed lead redesign, does it address? Again, we're in your perfect world, right? Because she's got all the funding and everything she needs.
We're advocating.
Is the plan to sort of reinvent the close collaboration with the law enforcement folks? Because I think that's, for me and my perspective, I'm obviously from the law enforcement world, but that sort of dissolution of accountability from the lead case managers' repertoire, and I'm sure that they would not view that as a tool in the toolbox, but maybe
they do.
But nevertheless, it makes everybody more effective because some folks need a little kick in the butt to be moved along. It's a either or situation.
You mean a figurative kick in the butt? I know.
Just a very
thank you
figurative kick in the butt. But some accountability, some coercion is necessary, and I think that collaboration with law enforcement does a couple things for you. It adds that piece, but it also is a feedback loop for law enforcement to feel like it's just not a bottomless pit of
exactly.
I don't arrest I don't arrest this drug user. I call somebody. Lead sends somebody, they have a 3-minute conversation. The user goes that way and the case manager goes that way. And then tomorrow I see that guy right out here again. And that's what we've got to, that's why I ask you, what is the metric? How do we, and if we're going to do, like you said earlier, if we're going to go to these major encampments and we're going to measure, if we get folks moved into stable housing or initial housing, how do we know if it worked or how do we know if it didn't work? I mean, obviously we've got to track all of that stuff, but how does the police officer know that when they diverted that for open use, how does the police officer know that anything positive is happening with these referrals?
Yeah, well, that's where a system for information exchange is critical. So we are going to have to invent something that substitutes for actually literally sitting around the table together, which is what we used to do. And then they knew exactly what the plan was, how the person responded, how great it went last week.
Yeah.
So we have to,
so my hope is— a program for you. One of the companies I'm representing right now in retirement is Peregrine, and would absolutely be a perfect overlay over all of these data sets with permissions built in, so that the cops can only see what the cops were supposed to see.
Kind of designed
managers,
for the HIPAA CJIS constraints.
Yeah, so
there are several. We partner with some of your competitors, but achieving that is critical.
Yeah.
So we've been working for, I think, 8 years now on a data systems integration for LEAD that has now come to fruition. So
with the RMS, right?
Yes. Yeah, so finally the LEAD database and it isn't, I think, waiting to turn it on until there's an e-learning about it and and some roll call visits about, so when you see this information, what does this mean? Yeah. What are you going to do?
Interpret.
But that's a game changer. And so having this substitute for real time conversation that is super accessible to officers who don't have time to go to meetings.
Well, and it also sort of accounts for it used to be that officers had more beat integrity. Officers that worked Belltown worked Belltown. Well, now the officer that's working Belltown might be from North Precinct. I mean, you might be backfilling, or it could be an augmentation shift. I mean, there's just, you don't have the knowledge. So that's why technology has to,
substitute,
fill that void.
Yeah. Totally agree. We're on the cusp of a reboot that has both of those partners completely, actively at the table. I'm not sure that I agree that, everybody needs a figurative kick in the butt. I do think to change. No, I know, or even most people. But what I do know is that our work is slow, and the sea of people in need is huge and far outstrips our capacity. So in the meantime, while we're scaling and building the the sort of ancillary resources that we have to make more progress faster, like shelters and recovery housing transfer and all of that, the public needs to know that these problems are not, it's not like we're on a 50-year time frame, right? That eventually we'll get to everyone. The system of response has to include police. It has to include non-police responders. That's right. Yeah. And so y'all are the people who the community sees coming. And lead case managers are out there. People don't even know that they're there because they're kind of melting into the population on purpose. But you, in turn, need to have somebody who is going to be that long-term support for the person who can keep you informed of the deep dive that is going on. Yeah. Right. And both pieces do have to be there, or the community loses confidence that we know what we're doing and that we're doing anything.
Well, and it also enhances each of those touch points,
That's right?
If the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, you lose continuity in how you're caring for that person.
I've always felt like, 1 in 100 people may need the kick in the butt or whatever, but
I think
one
it's like
person,
the threat of it can be, right?
But it's that one person, the fact that the one person who's like, screw you, I'm doing nothing, right? I'm just gonna, in the service of the 99 people who are they do want help, they are willing to take the help that's offered. That one person can destroy a lot of confidence and good faith.
Totally.
If they're allowed to just kind of like do whatever they want. It's Wild West. Personal autonomy. So I think having that backstop of like, if I have to, I have the authority to take enforcement action and I will. it helps with the other 99 people to know that we're in a contained universe that has rules.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's 99-1. That's not been my experience. But I'll also say
because you were a cop.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Because there wasn't what was supposed to happen for the 99.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, you were exposed to the one all day, every day.
Yeah. But I'll also tell you this. There's a whole lot of folks that we've had on this show that that state that their arrest and incarceration was what led them to their now eventual long-term sobriety. So, whether it's 1 in 100 or 3 in 100 or 20 in 100, it's my profound hope that we continue to offer services in a diversion capacity on the street to folks that are receptive to that. There are undoubtedly a large number of folks who continue to commit crimes for an extended period of time. And I'm not one who believes, maybe we'll get through to them in a year, or maybe we'll get through to them in 6 months. If people are continuing to victimize other members of the community, they need to be arrested, they need to be put in jail, they need to be disengaged from the criminal activity that they're participating in. And sometimes those interruptions, I think that's where we're missing the boat too. We're not capitalizing on those momentary disruptions where we're displacing them out of that drug environment. And we've all agreed that most of the crime that we're seeing has some drug nexus. We need to be capitalizing on that moment when we put folks in jail and getting people services there. So I would like to see a future state where the comprehensive case management and the continuum of care is not shut off when police book that person in jail. It should not be that.
Every point along the continuum should have a door back. Yeah. But the thing that's different about LEAD is that it's not transactional. It is, this person is in their situation. They do a lot of things as a result. They don't do just one thing one time. They do a lot of things over a long period of time. Connect the officer that connects them or the community member that refers them to LEAD, and sometimes people self-refer to LEAD because I'm out here committing crimes I don't want to commit and I'd like to make a change. Okay, so that's the beginning. This, like I said at the beginning, LEAD is not immunity from anything. So if you are out committing additional crimes, all cards are on the table. And the golden thread backbone connection remains so that the jail doesn't have to invent their own case management system. Just connect back. We're coordinating. Prosecutors aren't inventing their own care team. They're relating back. Our job is to have the best care team that there is so that anything that this person could accomplish, they will have the best support to do that. Incentives from prosecutors. I could file this case, but I've talked to the victim and they agree that they just like to see you make progress. I know you've been talking for quite a while about completing a housing screener. Yeah. If you do that, I will not file this charge. Those case managers can work with those incentives.
Those
it's
are the
really
kicks
brilliant.
In the butt I'm talking about.
Well, that's an incentive, though. It is positive.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. That's also just whether it's necessary or not. It's going to happen, so we have to coordinate.
Yeah. Well, I do think we stripped the deterrence out of the system. We especially did with kids. I was just joking with Susie Kroll about how folks absolutely know what to say to not get booked into jail, right? Mm-hmm. It's like 5 things you can say, you're going to be rerouted to Harborview or something else. And so I just feel like the deterrent consequence still needs to be there. But ideally, I don't want that call to come into 911, right? So I would much prefer we intervene at the earliest possible point when we can see
for
that
any listeners who are my progressive allies. I was a public defender in the 90s, the absolute high water mark of mass incarceration and the war on drugs. And I worked in Seattle Municipal Court, had 400 clients a year, and then I supervised people, so I had thousands of clients that I was responsible for. I personally represented thousands of people who were directed to, they got the kick in the butt. Everybody got many kicks in the butt. I'm really racking my brain to think of whether there was ever anybody who, as a result of that, changed their circumstances. And I
got
can't
news for
think
you.
of any.
Just look at our list of guests on the podcast, and there's quite a few.
I'm familiar with those stories, but again, those stories are, that is not the vast population. Those are some exceptional human beings. And as some of them have said, what happened was like, they decided to be done.
After many
I really believe, and a break is important, but there's other ways to accomplish a break.
Yeah.
There's so much, Amy told me not to say research, but there's so much evidence.
No, you can cite research.
There's so much evidence that even, 2 points to leave you with, and I know we're probably at the end, but number one, even very short stays in jail do lasting harm in ways that have no bearing, no connection to how long.
It's because it's done wrong. I would agree with you.
Maybe, but I don't think we're on the cusp of transforming that.
Well, I'm trying.
But it's because of the collateral harms, right? Like you didn't show up to get your kid from school, so then that triggered some sort of child welfare call. Anyway, the sort of rapid degradation of your other life circumstances puts people in a hole that is remarkably fast. It is remarkably fast. Also, everybody that we are encountering out in the field, I screen them. If they're going to go into co-lead, I look at their criminal history.
Yeah.
I read police reports to make sure that they can be safely placed in our program. And some people can't, most people can. But they all have pages and pages of criminal history. They have had this experience a zillion times, and they are still out there in abysmal state.
We don't disagree that they need a continuum of care. We don't disagree that they need wraparound services. I'm suggesting that that litany of crimes on their rap sheet is not acceptable. That's not an acceptable condition. We should not have people in community that are victimizing other people in community on a regular basis. And we've got to do better to disrupt those patterns.
Well, and I like that you were saying to my progressive friends, because that was my first year was just mind-bending. It was like every 30 days I'd have this new epiphany about, wait a minute, do we even know people can change? One of the big ones was I thought, it's the left doing the bootstraps thinking now. This is the weirdest thing, because it is. If you say, because that's what I kept hearing, like, well, we want them to be able to choose. And I'm like, but they're languishing and dying and being traumatized and being victimized, and like that.
The reason people feel that, I want to be
tell me.
Like, the reason people get dug in on those in that position is because they are watching really stupid policy unfold, and they're opposing. So they're in an oppositional stance toward things like encampment sweeps,
right?
And that's all that has been offered, and so people, it's like, if there are two options, one is people are displaced and the other is they're not displaced. I'm going with not displaced. We're like, how about a third option? That's really all of us. It is incumbent on all of us. And I do see the, momentarily triumphant, sort of like the correction to the overcorrection is now about to be an overcorrection. This we can't just put people behind a door where they're going to use drugs and that's the ceiling and they'll die or they'll live miserably and that's terrible. Like, that is a true statement.
Mm-hmm.
And also, to go from there to no one should be using drugs in a property with case like that. That's
it doesn't acknowledge what we know about success at all. It doesn't.
It isn't ever a choice between point A and point Z, and we don't have the rest of the alphabet. We always have all the other letters in the alphabet, and we have to build a road with all the features that work, and also all the features that the public demands, including enforcement. And we are, everyone in the lead environment who include radical harm reductionists, agree about that. And is pretty unique in that way because we've seen that is what works and that we need everyone who's going to have eyes on and touches on this person working together. That's the only road that's going to work.
Yeah.
Any last
comments? Just in closing, it occurs to me the first person in recovery in this work that I took Eric to talk with was Johnny Bousquet.
Mm-hmm.
And, we had a more formal meeting. We're talking about the site design. But then after, I watched Eric just talk to Johnny for a bit. And it's always interesting because those folks tend to really like law enforcement, right? Even though sometimes I would assume they wouldn't, right? That this would not be a friendly person. Eric was still sworn at the time. But I remember, driving away and we were talking about how actually anyone could be Johnny. Again, he is an exceptional person. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to minimize that, but that's something Nicole said on the podcast. You remember she said, I'm not a unicorn. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to acknowledge that we can do better, that people can be Johnny and they can be Nicole. Most people can. Mm-hmm. I think it is a very statistically insignificant few who really cannot ever live safely in community. I think that's pretty rare, actually. And so I just commend you. Yeah. I am a couple years in. I am exhausted. I don't know how you have done this. I swear. I always make the joke that I'm going to be like Obama in and out of office. But yeah, I just thank you for your integrity, for your moral conviction, for being adaptive too, for acknowledging like, okay, now we knew a new thing, so we're going to add this.
One of our advisors says, none of us is in any jeopardy of getting this right. And I think that if you don't embrace that, real life is just going to, embarrass you day in, day out.
Thank you, Lisa, for coming.
Both
thank you for being on the podcast. We really appreciate it.
For illustrating that dialogue is the way.
Yeah. We can actually talk about stuff and even disagree on things, and it's still good.
Yeah. We'll have you back this time next year so you and I can high five about all the cool stuff we did in 2026.
All right.
Looking forward.
Yeah, thank you.
And now you've been bombarded.
The Bombarded Podcast is a Barden Squared production. Executive producers are Eric Barden and Amy Barden, and video and audio production of the Bombarded Podcast is by Thread Theory Creative.